the Formula One cost cap and recent drama surrounding it. Unless you've been living under a rock, there has been lots of drama and talk around the cost cap in Formula One recently. There have been several teams who have been punished regarding the cost cap, with the team which has been affected the most being Red Bull. But before we get into Red Bull and what punishment they have been served, it would be good to get to know what exactly the cost cap is and what it's there for. Later on, we'll talk about Red Bull and drama surrounding them at the moment. Let's get into it. First off, the cost cap in Formula One is pretty much what it says on the tin. It is a cost that you are not supposed to exceed, or you will face punishment. The cap was introduced in the 2021 season and includes everything that a team spends in a season, excluding driver fees, marketing costs, and the costs for the top 3 highest paid employees at the team. However, all other costs such as car parts, all the way to catering within the team, were included in the cap. The yearly cap for each season is open to change due to inflation and other factors, but for 2021, it was set at $145 million for the entirety of the season. And for the first time in the history of Formula One, it requires all 10 teams to submit accounts of their annual spending. For 2022, the cost cap is reduced to $140 million, and it's expected to reduce further in the coming years. But why is the cap there, you ask? Well, it exists to limit the maximum amount of money any given team can spend. This stops the big teams like Mercedes, Ferrari, and Red Bull, who have what feels like unlimited supply of money, from having a large advantage over some of the smaller budget teams like Haas and Williams. So it helps to even the playing field by restricting the maximum amount of money that each team can spend in a season. Now, of course, some teams may not get near the $145 million that was in 2021, and it is said that teams like Alfa Romeo and Haas in 2022 were far below the $145 million. On the other hand, the big 3 teams, Mercedes, Ferrari, and Red Bull, are understood to have each spent over $400 million per year, with over 1,000 employees and leading-edge technologies and facilities at their disposal, while Haas were understood to have spent around $80 million in 2020. So, overall, the cap is there to make sure it is possible for the lower budget teams to have a fighting chance against the bigger teams, and therefore make the sport more competitive. Now onto the teams that broke the cost cap rules. The one that everyone is talking about is Red Bull, but 2 other teams, including Williams and Aston Martin, were also punished for administrative violations of the rules. Williams, in March 2022, were the first team to be penalised and fined $25,000 for a procedural breach caused by not submitting their 2021 accounts on time to Formula One's governing body, the FIA. Williams acknowledged and accepted their fine. The other team who didn't actually break the cap but were fined for a procedural breach was Aston Martin. They were fined $450,000 for inputting the wrong information and excluded costs such as new wind tunnels at their brand new headquarters. Many rumours did circulate that Aston Martin had broken the cap quite significantly and a severe punishment was expected, but these rumours were unfounded and they were issued with a procedural breach. Now, on to Red Bull. During the weekend of the Singapore Grand Prix, there were many rumours that Red Bull had also broken the cap for 2021. The day after Max Verstappen won at Singapore and secured his 2nd World Championship, the FIA formally announced that Aston Martin and Red Bull had breached conditions of the cap, with further details set to be announced in the next Grand Prix in the United States. Some fans and journalists started speculating and calling for Max's 2021 championship to be taken away from him, but perhaps that would have been harsh on Max. On the weekend of the United States Grand Prix, the FIA finally came out and revealed the punishments for Red Bull's violations and how much they had gone over the cap. Red Bull exceeded the 2021 cost cap of £118,036,000 or $140 million by less than 5%, £1,864 or 1.6%, which is a minor breach. The FIA then went on to explain Red Bull had applied the correct treatment within its full year reporting documentation of their notional tax credit within its 2021 submission of a value of £1,431,438, and therefore they would have exceeded the cap by $432,652 or 0.37%. What this means is that Red Bull only slightly overspent, and actually only exceeded the cap by $432,652, which is only 0.37% above what they were supposed to spend. Now, of course, many people would say that with this so-called minor breach of $400,000, they could develop new parts for their car that could have given Red Bull an advantage. Remember, we're talking about a sport where 1/10 of a second makes all the difference. Now on to the punishment that Red Bull got for going over the cost cap, and many people were unhappy that Red Bull were able to pretty much negotiate their punishment if they pleaded guilty. This is one criticism for the FIA, as they do not have a set punishment for breaking the cost cap, so they can pick whatever they want and speak to the teams who agree on the punishment. The first part was a $7 million fine that they must pay to the FIA in the next 30 days. Many people say this fine doesn't really mean much to Red Bull, which is true as they have billions, but it is still $7 million lost for breaking the cost cap by around $400,000. However, the next part of the punishment is far worse for Red Bull, and that was a 10% reduction in their wind tunnel time and their CFD limits. This would mean that Red Bull's allocation would be reduced to 63% instead of the 70% they would be entitled to due to them being the Constructors' Champions. The amount of time they get in the wind tunnel and with CFD is all based on the Constructors' standings, with the higher you finish in the standings, the less time you get in the wind tunnel and working with CFD. This is another rule to help make the sport more competitive, as if the top team had the same as the bottom team, the standings would be less likely to change, and we will probably have the same standings until the next regulation change. Now, a 7% drop may not seem like a lot looking at it, when Red Bull's closest rivals in Ferrari may have 75%, and Mercedes may have 80% if all the constructors' standings stay the same as it is. Having further reductions in the tunnel, testing the aerodynamics of their 2023 car will more likely hurt the team, and this could cause them to fall back in the Constructors' Championship fight for next year, behind Ferrari and Mercedes. With Mercedes having 12% more wind tunnel time, and them saying they have fixed the issue with the W13 car, this could allow them to get back to the front of the grid and fight Red Bull. For Red Bull, this little mistake in overspending could cost them a whole year and a chance to get Max another world title. However, for Adrian Newey, this would be a big challenge for him as any setback. He will once again want to show his excellence and try and keep Red Bull at the top come 2023. You may be wondering what caused Red Bull to go over the cost cap. The FIA's ruling detailed a few areas where Red Bull had wrongfully excluded some costs. Team principal Christian Horner has been cited as saying that a catering cost of £1.4 million last year is a company-wide benefit, so they considered it an excluded cost. But the FIA included it, and this pushed up their spend total. How much did the penalty harm Red Bull? We don't believe the $7 million fine will cause them a problem, as that value is like loose change to them. But the reduction in wind tunnel and CFD time could cause them to slip behind their rivals. And with Mercedes looking stronger in recent races, this might be all it takes to shift the advantage back to the Mercedes, or even give Ferrari the edge they need next year. What do you think? Will this cause problems for Red Bull, or will the brilliance of Adrian Newey allow them to keep fighting at the top? Do you think the cost cap is a good addition to the regulations? Leave your thoughts in the comments below and we'll respond. Thank you for watching this video, and make sure to like the video and subscribe.